Welcome everyone to the Newly podcast where you get no BS insights on how to grow yourself and grow your career. I am so excited today to welcome Miss Kelsey Ley or Mrs. Kelsey Ley. I don't know why I decided to add that. Kelsey Ley. And thank you so much for joining us, Kelsey. Welcome. Can you just tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah. Hi, Britta. Good morning. It's so good to be here. I like Miss and I like Mrs. I guess I am a Mrs. I
Love
feel
it.
like that's like a funny thing where we used to like write that on envelopes, but like we no longer do that.
Yeah.
It's more like my pronouns are she, her. Like that's how
Right.
we introduce ourselves. So
Exactly.
Hi, everyone. I am thrilled to be here. I am currently, I say that because I know we're going to talk about career path, but I am currently a consultant and an employee engagement trainer and coach and speaker. So, that looks like a lot of things, and I know we'll dive into it.
Fantastic. Well, thanks so much for sharing that with us. I usually like to start by just understanding a little bit about sort of your career journey, where you've gotten from A to B, from here to there. Could you just tell us briefly just a little bit about how you've gotten to where you are in your career?
Absolutely. So I'll try and make it short, but I went from professional ballerina, those in the dance world, like the modern contemporary ballet world. And then I went into the teaching artist space. So I got a degree in dance and education. And so I was very curious about how I could combine those two. Being a teaching artist, I taught in Chicago public schools. I taught the dance curriculum there, and that opens you up to the whole arts management world, which is much more than just teaching a ballet class to 6-year-olds. It's much more about the philosophy of the education of how you use the arts to make change in community and build trust and community, so that community members can start collaborating with one another and making change that they want to see in their homes. So I went to teaching artists. Teaching artists led me to arts management, really overseeing all the teaching artists. Those of you that have worked in the nonprofit or even small business space under 100 employees know that there's often not HR. So when you're a program manager, program director, and you're overseeing 75 artists, there is no HR. So I did all the hiring, all the onboarding, all of the performance management, and building the culture. That's when I was 25. So that was my entry to management, and that's really what kicked off like this evolution of this career. Because then we were in Chicago at the time, moved to New York, worked for even a larger arts institution there, and continued on that path of training artists, training community members about the value of bringing art to community, all of that. But I really got into, then I was like, okay, so at this level, working at an institution, you have systems change for your team and for your company. But I'm also seeing trends in the company culture space and the leadership space. And I'm curious about that system.
It's
like,
just,
how do I?
Yeah, it sounds like you've had just a really incredible journey, and I just am so excited to dig into it. So our topic for this show is you're new to management. Now what? And it sounds like in your journey, you really sort of trial by fire. Here I am. I'm HR. I'm onboarding specialist. I'm all the things, and I can imagine going from being a professional dancer to managing a team of people was quite a shock for you. Could you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that's where my education brain comes in and serves me so well. So I was that kid. You could talk to my siblings. I had a schoolroom set up in the house, and I made them come and be my students. And we had report cards, and we had homework, and like the whole kit and caboodle. I know there are a lot of fellow educators out there that made their siblings do that too. It's not uncommon.
I myself was in the school at my sister for sure. That's funny. So
I love it. So organizing and leading and um, just kind of stepping up in that way wasn't, and being a teacher, being in front of a space and having to, what is the end goal we have over the course of today in our 45-minute class together, over the course of this unit in the next 2 or 3 months, and over the course of like second grade, fifth grade,
Mhm.
12th
Yeah,
grade. Like,
yeah.
what do we want to accomplish here in this curriculum? So really, I took that model and just was like, what is happening this week? What is happening this season? And what do we know that happens annually? And how can we start to prepare for that? But like you said, I was totally unprepared. This is actually where my love for podcasts started. So I feel like
Oh,
it was when you're
that's
thrown
so
into a new situation, you just start like you're totally out of your comfort zone. You're like, what information can I find? So I just
totally.
started binging podcasts about leadership and company culture. It was kind of before the company culture space really took off. So it was much more leadership driven, but
Mhm.
and a lot of corporate. So it was like, how do I adapt this corporate information to this nonprofit arts organization?
Yeah, I love the perspective that you're taking there. First of all, I love that you talked about how you took this idea, this framework of teaching, and you applied it to spaces of management. I know there's a lot of teachers right now that are looking at pivoting careers, and
Mhm.
they're nervous about where do I apply these skills. So just that in and of itself is really an interesting topic, and I'm sure we could have a whole show about just that. But let's talk through. You have this really wonderful framework of how to approach management, and I believe you
Mhm.
said it's creating connection, fostering communication, and then growing collaboration. So
Mhm.
talk a little bit about the connection. How do you find that why that connects you with your team?
And this whole framework came out of what I was seeing, kind of the lack of, like, why aren't we collaborating? Why are we so good at collaborating with our clients and with before I got in the client relationship with our school partners and with our students, but
Mhm.
on the business side, it's not translating.
Yeah.
And connection was really number one. It's like, as a team, if we're only spending 30 minutes, an hour together a month, that's just not enough trust building to
Mm,
make these large scale collaborations, to get to collaboration. We all want to be collaborating,
yeah.
but it really goes down to this foundation of building connection. So I'm one that is a huge fan of icebreakers. I actually used to hate icebreakers because I don't like small talk. I just want to like go deep and I want to hear your whole life story. Um, but to get to the life story, I've realized I have to start
Yeah.
with icebreakers. So I really like to look at like the system of our day,
Mhm.
and say, like, where does this fit and how can we make this efficient and effective?
Mhm. Mhm.
I'm all about efficiency and effectiveness. So an icebreaker is a really simple idea, but take the 5 minutes. It's so easy to skip it.
Yeah. I love that you think about icebreaker as a way of building trust. You start small. When you meet someone, you're on a date, you don't just jump in and say, "Oh my God, tell me about all
Tell
of
me
your
about
trauma."
all your past relationships.
Tell me every single thing about whatever. Yeah. That's really not, like, to your point, that's not how it works. You start small and you build and you grow on that. And um I think what's so interesting too is as you start to build on that foundation of trust, and you're learning more about them through these icebreakers, you start to find, and correct me if I'm wrong, maybe there's like this common sort of why, or this common motivation that starts to arise, like, to the
Mhm.
top. Have you seen that happen with teams as you've worked with them?
Yeah, it takes a moment to pause. A
Mhm.
lot of I had the same eye roll. I was like, I don't really want to do the chit chat, but it takes, so it's a practice, it's a muscle like everything else, to sit down and like really drop into the meeting.
Mhm.
So the icebreaker drops us into the meeting. Anytime I'm facilitating a room, whether it's a room of 12 or 200, we drop in by either breathing or connecting with one another, likely both, but it's just like, let's enter this space because we have all the notifications flying around our world. Honestly, the efficiency piece is if we don't take the time to drop in and to connect with one another, everything else that happens later is just like the water and oil. It's just not like, there's a lot of bypassing one another. We're talking over each other. We're not really listening to one another. So this is a way to like activate our skills, like our listening ears, like lean in. Like my teacher sounds like, turn your listening ear. It's like, no, but really, this is what we have to do.
I love that. I love that. So as as you're grounding, you're sort of dropping into your body, you're learning and connecting from each other, it starts to foster, a level of communication, and that's sort of like the second part of your framework. There's connection, there's communication. So how do you start to understand or get people on board, get that buy-in for like, these are our goals? So you start with the icebreaker or something like that. How do you get to the communication part of it, the clarity and transparency?
Absolutely. So again, you can't really effectively communicate with one another unless you know kind of how they like to communicate, how they like to work, what's going on in their day. Is it realistic to do a full deep dive right now, or do we actually need to move that to tomorrow because someone has something going on in their personal, right? Like, so once we've decided we're in this and it's time to move forward into like taking care of business, then I'm a huge fan of, I don't know how many times I could say systems and like structure in one podcast, but here we are. But looking at the big picture, so we know what our purpose, mission, vision, values are, right? So that should act as our funnel for every decision we make. Is it aligned? Question one. Then we have our strategic like roadmap that comes from that. I know there's a lot of opinions about strategic planning, and I agree. It's no longer the 5-year roadmap that like is done by the board of any organization and then like added to the library and like a pretty pamphlet. But are we having, I mean, this is where the collaboration comes in, but are we having true conversations with one another at the executive level about where are we headed? And then do our teams know how they impact where we're headed? So all that communication has to happen at each layer of the organization to move the initiatives forward. I love, love, love less is more. Less is more.
I like that you talk about it, sort of this downstream effect where communication has to occur at these upper levels, and it has to translate, and people have to understand, how does my daily contribution affect that whole chain of command? And and I think what's interesting is there's this piece that's emerging recently, is that inclusion is not just about DEI. Inclusion is about understanding what motivates people, understanding different things. So talk a little bit more about how inclusion is really key to communication.
Yeah, and I think this is where a manager's role really steps up too. The executive team can't possibly, I know leaders get a lot of like hard times. It's hard being at the top. And they make really important decisions, and like they need to take responsibility, of course, all those things. Right. But I think the role of a manager, like I love the middle manager role because you get that opportunity to connect so closely to the people that are making the magic happen, right? The people that are on the ground with our customers, with our clients. They're the ones writing all the communications that are going out into the world and being seen. So to like tie these big things together, from a strategic plan to the people that are executing it, that's where the inclusion piece like reinforces that cycle, because inclusion can simply look like, I'm someone that has a really hard time riffing and brainstorming on the spot. So if you bring me a big idea and it's like, hey, what hey, I have this new idea, and what ideas do you have about it? I'm like, a deer in headlights. Like, I know there's
Oh
something
no.
in there. I know there's something in there. But
Yeah.
I need a little space to think about it. So I've gotten really comfortable. And at first, I used to try and make shit up on the spot.
Yeah.
But I've gotten really comfortable in saying, like, that's an awesome idea. Can I have till the end of the day? Can I have until our meeting next week? Like, depending on the time frame to think about that and really ruminate about it. So that little piece is inclusion.
Right.
Yeah, I can pause there, but there's a
Yeah.
lot of ways to go about your inclusive management approach.
I love the way you're describing how you experience inclusion effectively from your perspective. Yet, it involves different learning styles. So maybe someone is more audio driven, maybe someone is more visually driven. And I think we talked about this before, but it's almost like, I'm speaking a different language and I'm the manager. It's my job to communicate the message effectively. And, if I tell you all the instructions in Spanish, like, it's not gonna work, and
I
it
love
doesn't
that.
matter if I tell you in Spanish 4 ways, or I tell you in Spanish, louder or more angrily, like, it doesn't matter, you're not gonna get it. And it's, accommodating these different learning styles, these different listening styles, video, audio, kinetic, how can we
Yeah.
incorporate those different ways to
Mhm.
include in that communication? Say
Yeah.
just a little bit more about that. How have you experienced that?
Yeah, you just brought up such a good point. I love the Spanish speak. Like, it really can be a different language. And um, so I think onboarding is a place where you can really lean into this.
Mm,
Um, I don't always love to ask for forgiveness later, but if you're a middle manager and your company doesn't have the best onboarding system, like, just start experimenting with things on your
mhm,
own. It's your team, it's your environment. And then what I found is people are like, "Hey, wait, what tool are you using?" I'm just always one that I'm like, "I'm piloting something, I'm trying something, we're experimenting." Like, it's not what we're doing for the next 10 years, so it just
yeah,
doesn't have to be as serious. But so just take some things and start experimenting with them. But when you're onboarding, this is a great way to, one, like, I don't love to overuse, but I do really like to use some of the communication style assessments or
mhm,
personality style assessments, because that just provides some common language for us to talk about our differences, our superpowers, and really start owning some of that language that you want to integrate on your team.
yeah,
And then when I'm also onboarding someone, I ask them, like, hey, let's meet for, especially when you're training, like a 30-minute chunk, an 45-minute chunk at most. Like, let's do a deep dive. You take some time. Let's come back together. Right there's just more like chunking
mm,
people's learning in smaller bite size, and then giving them some space to breathe and start to apply it, and have them become an expert at something, a quick win early, so that they build their confidence, and then say, okay, are you ready? I think you're ready. Are we ready to stretch a little bit? Like, let's add more to your plate.
yeah,
Now, you can't always take, you know, uh, just, you can't handhold. Of course, this isn't about that, but it actually helps you integrate onboarding into your already full plate, anyways, if you're doing little bits at a time, and obviously
and you get to,
systematizing and
yeah. And it sounds like as you're chunking that time, you get to learn each time, you get to learn a little bit more about how does this person function best? Like,
Mhm.
what, you experiment, like, to your point with, how does messaging work with them? Like, how do I get their attention, easiest? Is it email? Is it Slack? Is it,
Mhm.
and just really gathering all that information and knowing how you can communicate effectively with your team, I think, is so key. So
Yeah.
as we
Yeah.
get into communication, we start to naturally collaborate, and
Yeah.
let's talk a little bit about how do you start to meet your goals. So it's, connection is sort of finding the why. Communication is where you start to, like, talk about goals and the goals we're going to meet, and then collaboration is really, you said, is the how. So talk a
Mhm.
little bit more about how communication leads into collaboration.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think all of this for new managers is the willingness to go first. I
Mm,
say this all the time. Like, if you don't know how you communicate best, start there.
mm,
If you don't know what you need and like, when new information comes in or when you're in a meeting, like how you retain information best, if you need to be, I offer to take the meeting notes a lot of, especially if it's a new environment, because that forces me to really tune in
mm,
and like turn the ideas into notes. And it's like, yeah, the first week, those notes will probably not be helpful to anyone, but moving on, like it ramps up my learning curve. So
mm,
you have to go first. You have to understand what you need, because as you use that language, you're empowering your team members to then share their strengths, what they need. And that trust and that communication flow only then encourages and enhances the experience once we get to collaboration. So
mm.
now we're at collaboration. You're saying, all right, our marketing is no longer working. Like we are, our sales pipeline is empty. What do we
Yeah.
do? Like this
Mhm.
product, I mean, think about COVID. Think about all of us. Like we're working remote still. That's still or forever. But
Yeah.
that's working fully remote is a very new, or even working hybrid. It's new for companies. We're working with a lot
Mhm.
of clients right now. It's just like, how do we continue the momentum with our teams? How do we continue engagement? Like it's new. We're creating this from scratch. And so that's where innovation and collaboration comes in. So that's bringing people together in a room and fully supporting them
Mm.
about what the process is going to be. Those of you that are design thinkers or know about design thinking, this is something I integrate into all of my work. This is how my team and I create our strategic plans, by using design thinking. And design thinking in a nutshell is a brainstorm approach that honors all different learning styles.
Wow, I love that. That's such a I would love if you have some sort of link I can give to the people that are listening to
Yes.
this to learn more about design thinking. What would
Mhm.
you tell so we're at the collaboration studies, what would you tell a manager that thinks, "Oh my god, I have to have all the answers," or "I have to be the best at all the things to be a
I
good leader?"
love this. This is why teachers are such good managers, because they
Mm.
know that they are not the information holders. They're like the
Mm.
information facilitator. So, like, the idea, the dream for a teacher is really to see your students teaching the students and
Wow.
you being able to step back. That
Mm.
that is the dream of a manager and a leader too, is that the peers, the colleagues are really engaging with one another and supporting each other. So I see the comment from Adam about design thinking. Oh yes, I have
Yay.
links upon links to share with you. No problem.
Fantastic. Yeah.
Um,
I just wanna point out one thing.
yeah.
You said this is why teachers make good managers because they're facilitators of learning. And that just unlocked something for me like, oh my gosh, I'm not a manager. I'm a facilitator. I'm a facilitator of X product or work or
Yeah.
whatever it is. I feel like for some reason that just takes a lot of the pressure off. Like it's not up
Mhm.
to me, it's up to me to foster this.
Yeah.
So what
100%.
yeah, what let's talk a little bit more about you were on this sort of riff of fostering and do I have to have all the answers? And
Mm.
you know that trap of instantly going to solution mode, like, okay, there's a problem.
Mm.
Let's fix it right now. What do
Yes.
you do with that?
Yeah. So the last couple of years, I've also done a deep dive into coaching, which I know you are also on that journey.
Mhm.
And I, for a long time, as an early manager, as an early teacher, you will want to have all the answers. You will
Mhm.
want, like, sitting in the unknown is so uncomfortable
Yes, absolutely.
at any stage of life, in any situation. Like, being in the unknown is terribly uncomfortable. Um, but if we can get better at it, it increases curiosity and decreases fear.
Mm,
So
yeah.
we become more curious as a manager.
Mhm.
Instead of saying, oh my gosh, you're not getting it, let me just take it off your plate and I'll do it. One, that's like that then goes straight to the beginning of the conversation. Our trust is now broken.
Mm. Wow. Yeah. Yep.
Because we no longer trust, that's telling the person, that action tells the person that we no longer trust what they were doing. So
Mm.
we actually need to take a step back and go back to communication. Like,
Mm.
what do you need? What is confusing you? What's working? What's not working? Um, what ideas do you have for moving forward? And let me bring my information and my institutional knowledge uh, and my gut instinct here. And what are some of the decisions? What's the one next step that we can make? Let's not worry about what's going to happen 3 months from now. What's the one next step? And if we don't have enough information to make that, let's bring in some other voices to sit and talk through that.
I love the point you made about how you didn't necessarily say, I don't trust you to complete this project. Your action of taking that project back communicates to them, I don't trust you. Or
Mm-hmm.
might communicate, you never know, depending upon that person's background, it might communicate, you're not competent, or I don't think you're capable, or, I don't believe you can do this. And
Yep.
so it's important, I think, I love the idea of understanding how our actions communicate and not just our words. Can you talk a little bit more about how to monitor how your actions communicate with your team?
Mm-hmm. Well, the monitoring piece, I think, is really one, I guess you could see looking at some of the behaviors. So if you're
Mm,
seeing behaviors you don't like, this is where systems thinking comes in. You really have to look at, well, what system have I set up that supports these like that has led to these behaviors? So
wow.
again, taking self out, but this is where accountability comes in, because a lot of the system is you. Or you
Mhm.
play you're a large piece of that puzzle. So that's where that curiosity, and that's where, if I could plug coaching, because I didn't really know much about coaching at the beginning of my I didn't know about coaching at all in the beginning of my management career. That's where someone can really, as an outsider, help you see some of your behaviors. Some of us have managers or leaders that can help us navigate this. And this is
Mhm.
where having mentors and having peers that are also managing others to talk through some of the, like, this is happening on my team. This is not the first time it's happened. I think I need to take a closer look at how I've either set up systems or how I'm reacting or behaving, because I no longer want X result to be a regular occurrence
Right.
anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's such an interesting approach. I think I know I've fallen victim to this. I've done some management, especially, early on in my career, it was coffee shops. I was managing
Mm,
Caribou Coffees and
yes, I was managing retail stores too.
love it. I feel like everybody should work in retail at least once in their life to really understand,
Yeah.
but that's a whole nother topic. But I remember I made the mistake often of I would see a behavior I didn't like, and instead of like you're saying, considering the system that I've created that makes this behavior possible, or the system maybe that the corporate structure has created that makes this behavior possible,
Mm-hmm.
it would just be straight to accusatory blame. Like,
Mm-hmm.
you're doing the wrong thing. This is not how you do it. And how would you tell someone to navigate away from that? What would you recommend they do to get out of that thinking and have a more holistic way of looking at it?
Mm-hmm. First and foremost, I would just pause.
Mm,
And just have empathy for the individual. If they're not showing up, let's talk retail. If they're not showing up for work, or if they like disappear for 2 hours for a lunch break, again, we don't know what's going on. Even
mm,
with all of our best icebreakers, there's a lot of layers that just aren't always appropriate to bring to work, and that's fine. So like, pause, empathy. Two, this is actually me getting into design thinking, but you notice a trend. So
mm,
now I notice a trend. What is the trend? And then the curiosity kicks in to understand the root cause of that trend,
Yeah.
especially if it's happening over and over, right? It's a trend. It's not just a one-off of someone taking a 2-hour lunch break because they had to go deal with, something going on in their family, but this is becoming something that regularly happens.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. That makes sense. I love that framework that it was, empathy, pausing, having empathy, getting at the root cause, and then noticing trends and then addressing that. I think that's such a great thing. I love the sound of your beautiful boy in the background.
Oh,
He's
yeah. He's
playing.
awake. The day has begun.
Such a sweet kiddo.
Mm.
So we're coming to the end of our time together, and I really enjoyed this conversation. And if
Me
people want to
too.
learn more from you or more about how to become a better manager or people manager, people centered manager, what can they do? How can they
Yeah.
find?
Thank you. Yes, actually, this is such perfect timing, and I love when the stars align. But we are actually doing a free workshop in the middle of March 15th, and it's the
Wow.
foundations of leading people-centered teams.
Love
So it's the beginning. It's for first-time leaders. It's for new managers. It's for those that are maybe in a career transition and are really looking like, hey, I want to be a bit more confident when I'm in interviews, talking about what I look for in teams at companies, and like having some of these frameworks to lean on. I've found people really enjoy that as well. But also LinkedIn, we love to be active on LinkedIn, and my website is kelseyley.com.
Fantastic. Okay, so we're going to end with some rapid fire questions, and then we'll send you on your way. And thank you so much for
Okay.
joining.
Thank
So the last,
you.
yeah, absolutely. This has been such a fruitful conversation. So I'd love to have you on the podcast again if you're willing. It'd be so fun.
Much to chat about.
Yeah, it feels like there's at least like 5 podcasts that we just did. So, first rapid fire question: what is the most random job that you have ever had?
I worked takeout at a Chinese restaurant.
Oh, wow. That would be a difficult one. I can't imagine.
Oh, we could do a whole, yes.
Yeah.
I'll just pause there because that's exactly what
Okay.
happened.
That
That
sounds
was
good.
part of my being in Chicago and trying to, I was interning at the arts organization, but I was also performing and auditioning and just, doing the whole artist life. So
All that hustle. I
yes.
feel that well.
Yep.
Okay, so the last rapid fire question is: what is the worst career advice you have ever received?
That strategic thinking is not, that we don't do strategic planning.
Mm, mm,
I was
that makes
very
sense.
confused by that.
Absolutely.
And now it sent me on a mission to really understand that. And now I know that I just don't agree with it.
There you go. I love that. I love that it created a curiosity and a fire. Yeah,
Yes.
some of the best bad advice I've received has fueled some great learning. So I totally resonate with that. Well, thank you so much for joining us on the Newly podcast, where you get no BS insights about growing yourself and growing your career. And we'll have you on again soon. Thank you so much, Kelsey.
Thanks, Britta. Talk to you later.